The MEEK by William Woodrow. This story was only ever published in New World's Quarterly 2, one of the many anthologies edited by Michael Moorcock. Read by Darrell T. Smith II for my channel, Quasar Spectra. The MEEK. It would have been my last assignment in any case, regardless of what happened. For me, it was a sentimental journey, a ritual, one could have said, if that word has not been expunged from the official vocabulary of the Atlantic Republic. It has overtones, the president said, of anachronistic religiosity. For everyone else, it was simply Assignment 33/2058/ANT, to discover exploitable and possibly habitable territory where the pollution level was below ASP5. That the prospect should cover the same ground as the first crossing of Antarctica in its centenary year occurred to no one, was remembered by no one, except me. That sentimental streak of mine has always hindered my advancement in the service. I'm 35, retirement is 6 lunar cycles away, and I have reached the rank of Guild Sergeant, a standard one normally advances from at 15 or so. But who wants a poetic officer? What service would voluntarily employ a colleague with a conscience, an ecologist who sees beauty in the sunrise, sadness in the falling of leaves, and has bad dreams? I was there. I saw all that happened as it happened. I added my observations to those of my colleagues, yet the official report differs from my own. That is to be expected. Official reports deal with facts, eschew sense impressions that are not backed by CCDP techniques, that is, Consolidated Computer Data Processing, and, generally speaking, tidy up the rather ragged and sometimes incoherent utterances of unpromoted guild sergeants with consciences. I talk a lot. Nobody listens. I read, too, old books, real books, books that I ache to share, but nobody wants to know. Somebody might sometimes, somewhere, be just curious to know not the facts, but the impressions, the impact, the poetry that is the pity, so to speak. So, here it is. My commentary, my observations, my on-the-spot diary notes directly transcribed. With the cooperation of the Pacific Alliance states, we established an HQ on the site of the old Polar Research Center at the pole itself. From there, several missions set out, each one having 4 personnel: engineer, land technologist, geomorphologist, and ecologist. Other specialists remained at base, but were on call by each party at need. Our prospect ran towards the Beardmore Glacier. Who can imagine the desolation of that landscape? The furrowed and fretted ice, the wind that burns, the vast monotony that is Antarctica. I'm at it again, rhapsodizing, denigrating, rather, the inanimate. I've been told too often that landscape is raw material, the potential energy of the universe which only man can realize and harness and bring to fulfillment. Only man, mere man, who, so one of the species said centuries ago, struts and frets his weary hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. Sometimes the ice appears to smoke and fume. We are hemmed in by blizzard and swirling snow. Nothing can be done. Just for the record, Pearson checks bearings, takes radar scans, and amends the route plan. Naylor strips down the solar cell motors and tunes the pressure drive units. McLaren takes ice and snow samples, checks the pollution level, and measures the radiation emissions. I appear to be supernumerary. What can an ecologist do in a landscape devoid of life? Data is radioed back to HQ and collated there. Otherwise, Pearson, Naylor, and McLaren chew tranquilizer gum and sit. I sit. Sometimes I have bad dreams. One wonders. Pearson, Naylor, and McLaren, duties done, tranquilized, remote, withdrawn. Are they happy? One cannot ask, since happiness, the word, not the concept, is no longer viable. We're all happy, the president said, so how can one ask? It's like asking, are you alive? We made a move today after the store's ship came. The blizzard held off long enough for us to move right up to the glacier's foot. This is base for all of us, Pearson, Naylor, McLaren, and me, until the assignment is complete, or HQ calls us in. Some kind of meteorological tension is building up. Storms, electric storms that set the instruments whirling, range over the glacier. High above us tower great masses of cloud, like steam rising, and always the wind that tears at the cloud mass and disperses it as fast as it forms. Radio communication with HQ is tenuous and spasmodic. Pearson got through today and checked in with control. All other mission teams satisfactory. Storms seem limited to the glacier region. And the storm goes on. We, buried now in drift, are caught up, held, isolated from HQ, self-sufficient for the time being, in a rhythm that has imposed some kind of extrasensory order on our lives. Naylor has been performing some complicated business with the generators. We are now drawing our energy from the storm itself. We're harnessing, in a way I cannot follow, the actual kinetic energy of the lightning. All instruments have been switched onto automatic record. We have all lapsed into semi-sentience. Pearson, Naylor, and McLaren chew tranquilizer gum and sit. I sit. I have bad dreams. Once I woke, but had I even slept? Day and night no longer mean anything. And heard, really heard, not imagined, heard the leitmotif of the Flying Dutchman. Apt. I remembered switching on my portable recorder with one of the tapes I'd brought along as personal luggage. I listened. It was the overture, then silence. Naylor is shaking me awake, pointing, talking, incoherent. Pearson and McLaren, bleared and unshaven, mutter together. There is a persistent rattle like teeth chattering, but not teeth. The instruments, still on automatic, are all live. Something of Naylor's urgency comes through. The Geiger counter is registering a high degree of radiation. Naylor says, "I'm telling you, idiot, I'm telling you. It's radioactive snow." Pearson is saying over and over, "They've done it. They've done it at last. The bastards, they've dropped it at last." Saying, not talking, not communicating, uttering and making articulate the pent-in fears of generations of forebears. McLaren, steadier now, the sediment of tranquilizer gum still in his system, is trying to radio to HQ. No good. The interference level is still too high. Me, still hearing faintly the Dutchman theme, inwardly hearing, the recorder is turned off. What of me? I look at my watch, a mechanical and meaningless act, and read 0815 hours. The date square shows August 6th. Coincidence? Coincidence is immeasurable and therefore invalid, the president said. Inadmissible evidence. The shadow of Cain that fell then as the rain falls indiscriminately, has it fallen once again? Words all about me. Naylor's reiterations and exhortations to action, Pearson's mouthings, McLaren more lucid than the other two, but just as futile. All words that act as descant to those other words, detritus of 1,000 words, that whirl me to wakefulness. Blessed are the peacemakers. I'm telling you, you idiot, what a piece of work is man. The bastards, the bastards. Where is the way the light dwelleth? Calling HQ. Active snow. Hast thou entered into the treasures of the snow, or hast thou seen the treasures of the hail? Are you receiving me? Do you read me? Over. Which I have reserved against the time of trouble. The bastards! They've dropped it. The waters are hid as with a stone, and the face of the deep is frozen. I'm telling you, radioactive snow. They've done it. Are you receiving me? Do you read? Over. And faintly, we all heard, but faintly, HQ to Alpha 10, HQ to Alpha 10. Yes, we read you. Over. Gently, almost soothingly, HQ's stilted and formal voice brought us back to normal. Information was passed and instructions were issued. Yes, HQ was stormbound. No, they had not dropped it. The intense radioactivity seemed to be a localized phenomenon centered at the foot of the Beardmore Glacier. We were almost at the focus. Finally, yes, we were okay. The safety level of our screening device was nowhere near the red. Yes, we could safely proceed even to focus itself without endangering the electronic contents of our capsule. Incidentally, we, Pearson, Naylor, McLaren, and me, would be safe too. We had difficulty in surfacing, not on account of the radiation. The screening took care of that. The capsule works on a hovercraft principle by compressed air. It was the desiccation plant that delayed us. Unless the air is wholly dry, it will freeze in these latitudes and choke the vents. Naylor, with McLaren to help, spent an hour stripping down the drying chamber and replacing the pump. We surfaced through 20 feet of drift into the ubiquitous whiteness of the snowscape. Surface and sky, it was all the same now, without even sunlight to cast shadow and throw the unevenness into relief. Perhaps a kilometer away, perhaps more. Distances are difficult to calculate without some scale of visible values. Where the snout of the glacier should be, something had happened. Great clouds of steam were rising, billowing upwards, condensing constantly and falling again, not as snow, but as fine hail. The Geiger counter chattered. It was this hail, not the snow that blew crosswise from the pole, that was active. We radioed HQ. No, the seismograph was not registering excessive tremors. A slight increase in ground noise, with a few subsidiary ripples, but nothing more. We reported the steam cloud and the radioactive hail. We described the billowing cloud, but neither we nor they voiced the relief we felt as we referred to the amorphous mass of steam, being careful not to say that it had no recognizable shape, let alone say that it was not mushroom-shaped. Instructions now. Orders to get across there and see. HQ to stand by. Out. We set off cautiously, not in direct line, but upwind, leaving the geyser to port. It was Pearson who first used the name and gave us all a psychological relief to repeat so normal a term. 2 kilometers to windward, we pivoted and began to run in. The geyser, no more surely than that, was line ahead. We ran up an incline, slight at first, but steepening, and halted on the lip of a crater just where the meltwater outflow would have been in temperate climates. The crater brimmed with water, dark, turbulent, and steaming, the steam column starting about a meter from the surface. That was all. The radiation level was high. but no danger still to us inside the capsule. Teamwork began. We measured and photographed. By remote control, we took the surface temperature of the water and found it a uniform 44 degrees Celsius. We took samples and retreated a kilometer to report and rest. Instructions from HQ. Stand by for supporting capsule with Team A. Do nothing. Rest. I liked the supporting capsule touch. Subtle. Team A are the big boys, the scientists, beside whom we mortals of the technician class are about as significant as laboratory animals and just as expendable. We rested. We all chewed tranquilizer gum and slept. I had no dreams. Team A came and conferred. 4 of us, 2 Team A men, they do not appear to have names, just call me Sir, McLaren and me will put on radiation suits and go out on power skis to inspect the lip zone of the crater. Already after 24 hours, the turbulence had subsided. There was a mere wisp of vapor, and the hail was reduced to a slight but persistent smattering. We made our ways across the surface towards the crater. I cannot say what I expected to see. I cannot speak for McLaren and the Sirs, and it doesn't much matter. If I had seen bug-eyed monsters crawling from a spaceship submerged there in the crater, I might not have been more surprised. On the lip of the crater, on the ice itself, growing there, was a narrow ring of green fronds, like massive bryophytes, or, more accurately as it turned out, aerial mycelia of giant fungi. And that was all, except for blobs of jelly, dark-centered, nucleated, like huge frog spawn. Into this jelly, and this is important, into this jelly, not out of it, delicate and transparent hyphae grew from the tangled mass of vegetation already established. I was an ecologist. This was my business. But one of the Sirs was an ecologist too, and he took command. I was dispatched to the capsule for some radiation-screened specimen tubes, and he took samples which returned with him directly to HQ. Again, we held a watching brief. As we suspected, as I had determined provisionally from observations in situ, the vegetation was some form of fungus hitherto unknown. The jelly, protein, but structurally new according to HQ biochemists, was the substrate on which the fungus fed. One other important discovery was that the green pigment was not chlorophyll. The growth was parasitic and could not photosynthesize. This fact, more than taxonomic data, convinced HQ that the growth was a fungus and not a moss. So that we should have some basis for communication, we provisionally named the new species Penicillium superbus antarcticus, PSA for short. Back at HQ, our whole lives centered about PSA. Every kind of biologist we could muster did all that he could with it. What was beyond the scope of our apparatus was left for central laboratories to accomplish from samples dispatched in screened and refrigerated containers. Since we, the crew of Alpha 10, that is, Pearson, Naylor, McLaren, and me, were in a sense the discoverers of PSA, we were the crew chosen to return to the crater after a lapse of 3 days for further supplies. Confident to a man, blasé even, we set off. We never reached the crater. We didn't need to. In those 3 days, the growth had spread out radially so far as we could see, and the edge of the field was now almost a kilometer from the crater. Furthermore, the radiation level had dropped so low that we could almost have survived without screening. These 2 fragments of data turned the scale for a mission that had been debated by Team A almost since our return to HQ. It was, to mount over the crater, the standing tackle for a Munchausen descent sphere. a sophisticated variety of deep-water diving chamber, and make a descent into the crater itself. Pearson and Naylor, who had once done a tour of duty over the Blake Deep off Puerto Rico, would crew the sphere. Crossing the fungus field was like crossing heather moorland. The fungus had the same crispness, the same resilience underfoot. Most of the apparatus, including the heavy winching gear and cable, was conveyed by transport helicopters. The working party, wary still of radiation and possible side effects from the fungus itself, went by capsule hovercraft. That night, we slept again in Alpha 10. No tranquilizer gum. Oh, dreams. Oh, destinations. On August 13th, at 0815 hours, Pearson and Naylor began the descent. It must have taken several days to complete, but time became confused, and my diary shows one continuous entry. For hours on end, the great winch slowly turned and, turning slowly, let down the capsule on its 3,000 meters of cable, first into the great cylinder in the ice gap, then into the earth itself. 500 meters, 800, 900 meters, then Naylor's voice tugged at us from the telescreen. "Hey, did you see that? The jellyfish!" The screen showed dark rock, mineral, speckled and igneous. Then suddenly nothing. The light shone outward, but the walls had gone. Naylor's voice. "There, again! Now!" Faintly refracting light and not reflecting it, we saw a mass of the frog spawn-like jelly that had littered the snowscape around the crater, the substrate of the fungi. 1,000 meters, 1,500, more jelly now, progressively more until the capsule was coated with it and folded in it. 1,750 meters. Then sound transmission failed, and we were left with an intermittent and smoky-looking picture on the vision monitor. Pearson and Naylor, moving sluggishly, seemed to be arguing then, as the picture clouded even more, began to fight. The picture failed totally, permanently. HQ control to base Alpha 10. Prepare the ascent. Over. A change of gear, of pace, of rhythm. The winch began winding in. No contact now, although the telelink was still live. All that showed was smoky green darkness shot over with a blizzard of light flashes. As the capsule came within 20 meters of surface, we heard again, tentatively at first, then with growing insistence and regularity, the chatter of the Geiger. The capsule was coming up active. I was there when it surfaced. McLaren and I went in with the rescue team, screened and shrouded, into the communicating valve of the conditioning chamber. The capsule was embedded deep in jelly so that it looked like the nucleus of some vast amoeba, or, as McLaren put it, like giant frog spawn. From the opening of the pressure door, it took 6 hours to get them out. The capsule was entirely filled with the aerial mycelia of the fungi, whose sustenance-seeking hyphae were bedded deep in all that remained of Pearson and Naylor. Just then, for the first time in days, the sun came out, wan and distant, right on the horizon. In that unaccustomed gleam, their bodies looked like nothing more than great blobs of jelly, like giant frog spawn. McLaren went today. As I write, back alone inside Alpha 10, I can see a faint green fuzz on my forearm and hand. The light fades, my eyeballs prickle and weep. I have 1 pack of tranquilizer gum, and I chew. I sit. Maybe I'll have bad dreams. You've been listening to pre-1990s speculative fiction readings with a highlight on science fiction by Darrell T. Smith II. Please consider clicking the donation link in the description box. Thank you so much for your time and your imagination.